For centuries, Alderaan stood as a beacon of hope in the Republic. But the Empire came.
I have chosen to test this station's destructive power on your home planet of Alderaan.
Peace while you suffer. The Emperor drowns you in black waters.
He wants me to be Darth Revan again. Serve him as I did centuries ago. He made me a Sith Lord and named me Darth Revan.
The Force does not control you. You saved Ugantia using something you thought was important. But your motives are still aligned with the Jedi Code.
To arms, men! Defend the throne!
Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him.
He was weak and foolish, like his father. So I destroyed him.
Master Windu, you have fought gallantly. Worthy of recognition in the archives of the Jedi. It is finished.
To them it is.
I have been waiting for you. Is it true that he is the chosen one?
Hey guys, it's Alex, and you're joining me, and only me, rather appropriately, for a solo special podcast, riding it solo, also in a fairly abandoned shopping centre, not just out of context. I am actually here for a reason, and that is of course to see the midnight showing of Solo for whatever reason in 3D. And I did just remember that fact, and I'm quite sad about that still, because I don't do well with 3D. But what I thought I'd do is, and I know I didn't do this for Last Jedi, is do a thoughts and opinions before we actually go and see the film, and then hopefully, if I'm not too tired, an immediate thoughts and opinions after I've seen the film. So the first thing that I'm going to dive into is characters that I'm looking forward to seeing, or actors I suppose I'm looking forward to see within the film, and then some background around those of what I've heard in terms of reviews that have already been put out. Obviously, lots of Star Wars fans, if you're part of Star Wars fan pages, you probably will have already got this gist. That lots of fans looking forward to see Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, but as the reviews go, apparently he's not in it for all that long, if I'm getting that right. I may be getting confused with Woody Harrelson's character, who plays Beckett. I think there's some talk that he may not be in the film very much at all, but the best moments are with Donald Glover, and to be fair, most of us had that assumption anyway. I was just going through the IMDb cast list, and I see that Warwick Davis is once again in this film, as he has been not only with most of the core Star Wars films, but also the standalone film Rogue One, and he's going to be playing Weasel, so we yet to see which character that'll be. And also something that I noticed is that Anthony Daniels, who plays C-3PO, is going to be playing someone called Tak, which is spelled T-A-K. Apart from that, I mean, I'm not very good with actors and actresses anyway, but there's no one else on this list that I necessarily recognise. Saying that though, I think there was one. Oh yes, there's the guy who did, I think it was either the mocap or the voice for the Pale Orc's brother in the Hobbit films. He's going to be playing someone called Corso. Oh, and also the Iron Man director, John, he's going to just do a voice, and he's doing Rio Durant. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But I don't know whether, I mean, I've revealed this in podcasts of past, but a hope of mine was that we'd be seeing possibly another Vader moment, and it would become like a tradition of these standalone films. And also, I hoped that would link into the reason why Han went so full-on attack so quickly on Cloud City. Possibly that he forms a love interest with this new character. I believe her name is Kira, but it's spelled Q-I and then little apostrophe R-A as opposed to K. And she's going to be played by Emilia Clarke. So I hoped that you would see her get axed off by Vader, and then that would create the kind of cynical Solo that we see in Episode 4. But all of this was speculated before I realised that we were meant to be getting 3 films as part of this little kind of Solo story of the past. And I don't know whether what I'm hearing is true, whether we're going to be getting a Solo, Lando and then Kira film, or whether it's going to be all Solo and this is just like the build-up film, because apparently some reviews say that it's quite slow, so we're still yet to see whether that's the case or not. I mean, to be fair, lots of people said that Rogue One was slow, and it was, for me, I think that kind of build-up was quite necessary for the final act, but each their own, I suppose. And of course we've also got news from John, the Iron Man director, who said in past interviews that the Star Wars series or content that he's been working on, that will be set after the Battle of Yavin, but he was quite clever with that because it's actually 7 years after the Battle of Yavin, which to my understanding is 3 years after the Battle of the Forest Moon of Endor. Correct me if I'm mistaken. And it will be bridging the gap between Episode 6 and Episode 7. The only thing that we really got before The Force Awakens came out was the Journey to the Force Awakens graphic novel, as far as I'm aware. I know there are some Aftermath books and they're still canon, so there's probably a lot there, but I don't know whether it necessarily follows the core characters. I'd have to inquire with my co-host Harrison on that front. The things that I'd like to see in Solo, and as the trailer would suggest, we're getting lots of stuff to do with the Empire, Solo's backstory and his association with the Imperial Academy. So I'm hoping to see a lot of Star Destroyers, a lot of Imperial troops. We're getting a new kind of TIE fighter if the trailer has anything to show for it. And new troopers. I'm not too fussed about the new troopers because I'm just not a fan of their kind of clunky design, but we'll see how that plays out in the actual film itself. And as I mean, I don't know how I feel about this, but obviously the actor's getting on a bit. The new guy who's going to be playing Chewie, he's quite a tall lad in himself, so fair play. We'll see how well he plays the role. But I suppose Kenobi's still yet to be confirmed, so whether we're going to possibly get the Solo films, whether like again if they're Lando and then Kira before we get Kenobi, or whether we're going to get Kenobi that will then break that up a bit, is yet to be fully confirmed to my understanding. Again, do correct me if I'm mistaken. But I don't know whether we're going to be getting any cameos from our much loved droids. That's a point. If we don't, this will be the first film that they haven't been in. Wow. I don't know how Star Wars fans are going to like that. I mean, wow. I don't know if they would have any place in it, because during this time they're on the Tantive, so I don't know whether they would actually make an appearance. It's going to be a real shame if they don't, but at the same time I have no idea how they write it in for them to make an appearance. We'll definitely wait and see. But my real worry is that Star Wars Episode 8, and again, I probably don't need to elaborate on this too much because you guys are probably all fully aware of this, that Star Wars Episode 8 caused such a rift between Star Wars fans, old and new. Disney's ownership of Star Wars and the people associated with it could be in severe trouble if this kind of, the rate that they're churning out content, and it's in the grand scheme of things, and if we're just considering old Star Wars fans at the moment, it's not all that much loved. So they've got to kind of change what they're doing if they wish to keep these old Star Wars fans still consuming content and actually enjoying it. I dare say there are lots of us that they could continue to make films, myself included, and we would still go and see it regardless, because that's just kind of who we are. But I'm hoping that this new stuff with the Game of Thrones guys, alongside of Rian Johnson's new trilogy, will attract the older fan base. Not even the older ones, just the ones that appreciate the old kind of methods of storytelling and the stuff that the Game of Thrones writers do really, really well, where it isn't too covered with this kind of correct way of doing things. Or at least that's not the feel I get in Game of Thrones. In terms of the new aliens, in terms of the old aliens that we're meant to be getting, we've already had Twi'leks more or less confirmed, so that's quite nice. But in terms of old aliens that we've seen in the past that we may want to see return, I'd like to possibly see some of the old faces that we saw in the cantina on Tatooine, even if it's just for a moment, because we've got that scene, the gambling between Han Solo and Lando. So that would be a grand opportunity to bring in some new creatures, which I dare say they'll take the opportunity to do, and also some old faces as well, like some Twi'leks and also some other alien and humanoid creatures as well. Disney have now got into the habit of bringing out almost like show reels where they show new shots, whether it be behind the scenes, actual cameras that are in view, or actual fully edited and animated shots as well, and also accompanied with interviews with the cast and director. But there was a separate one that came out with just Donald Glover, where he was giving us a tour around the new Millennium Falcon, the Kessel Run Falcon, and he's pretty psyched about the capes that he gets to have, and he's got a kind of like a wardrobe section that has all the capes inside. So what I'm quite excited about the prospects with that is that we could, and I know loads of people are going to hate this because they probably detect this as a bad thing, but I'm pretty psyched about it, is the possibility of us getting multiple figures, be it the Black Series, the Elite Series, or even all the way down to Lego. Donald Glover's Lando with these different coloured capes, and then we could get loads of different sets with Lando as a character that you don't see very often at the moment within series like Lego, only in the sets that are kind of like throwback sets. It would be nice to, it's almost like an excuse to have him, but it's an excuse I would see as a good one to take. Lego's also revealed something quite interesting. The ship that you see flying away in, I think it may be in the first or second trailer, with the giant explosion erupting behind it, I made the connection, probably within one of my trailer reviews, that it was the front part of the Kessel Run Falcon that they would then attach as either like a deployable escape pod or just a cargo carrier. But it turns out that that's actually an Imperial ship that kind of folds up almost like one of the foldy wing shuttles, but it's actually kind of that body that folds upwards. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it looks pretty cool. So I'm guessing they steal that, and it has some kind of cargo within it. But again, we'll see, and hopefully I'll remember to come back to this and talk about what actually happens there. So all in all, I mean, when I first set out today, I wasn't all that excited for this new film. I'm not going to lie. But you know, I've got other stuff going on which probably threw my excitement out of the loop a bit. So at the moment, yeah, I mean, just talking about it has raised my excitement quite significantly. I mean, it's always good to go and see a new Star Wars film, even if it doesn't turn out to be exactly what we wanted. But the good thing is, for me personally, is that Solo, although a cool character, has never been on my top... Well, I'll say never. I dare say in a Nerds Cast I've said a load of stuff that doesn't apply now. But at the current moment, he doesn't stand as one of my top characters, even from the original trilogy, if we're just counting those alone. So I don't have these high expectations that other Star Wars fans have of what the story, or the story that they want to be told. I know some of the backstory, like the old original lore, and some of the ideas that others have had of how they would like this to all play out. So, and I can see why those are fan favourites and why people would want that to happen. But at the same time, I'm not sitting there in the cinema waiting for that to happen. And it was something actually, kind of a curveball that I was thinking about on the bus ride over here, was that I know I've said in the past whether it be on podcast or not, that with these new Star Wars films, be it the standalone films or the core films themselves, if you don't like them, then you don't have to you don't have to actually admit their existence, and you can just pretend that they don't. I'd like to kind of say that in a way that isn't so kind of final and almost like a child throwing unwanted toys out of a pram, to something along these lines. There are 2 universes that now exist, probably 3, but the third one is more like stuff that was never canon. You've got the new Disney canon, and then you've got the old canon, which is now Legends. You can jump between the 2, and you can still, these stories, they're not outright saying they never happen per se. Obviously there are some stories that now can't happen because Luke's no longer around, supposedly, and Han died instead of Chewie and things like that. But you can still look at this as being a separate universe, and that these characters still went through Shadows of the Empire, and that Revan still existed, and that Darth Bane still did the things that he did, and that Darth Plagueis still did all the things that he did, and all the stuff that we love from the Old Republic, all the way down to the Yu Zhongfeng War, and even beyond that to the New Sith Order. So we don't have to say necessarily that it no longer exists. We can just say that it's a separate universe, which we can dive into whenever we want. If you want to dive into it permanently because you're not liking what Disney's doing, then fair enough to you, because God knows I dive into it every so often. That's enough said from me. So in less than an hour now, I'll be stepping into the cinema, and with my own eyes, hopefully unchanged with opinions from reviews and things like that, and I'll be going in with a clear head and viewing Solo for the first time. So hopefully after this you guys will hear my first thoughts, and then I dare say Harrison, Eleanor, Matt, Bob, Tom, all people will be on the podcast at one point, and we'll cover the Solo in our own special way. See you guys soon. So, did I think it was good? No. I thought it was great. I don't know what people are talking about. I think people are just, for whatever reason, completely against talking in a film to establish a scene or a setting or a mood or a climax. People just seem to hate that. You know, it's just action, 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 and you kind of do need that stuff in the middle. It doesn't really matter where it takes place, as long as it leads somewhere, and this film really led somewhere. And the one thing that I was super concerned about the fact that we were meant, or are meant, past tense and future tense, that we are meant to be getting another 2 films, and my worry was, what are those films going to be about? What is it going to lead on to? Is there going to be like a cliffhanger? And by God, there was one. And by this point, hopefully everyone that's watching the podcast will know, whether it's they've seen it on Facebook pages or God knows where. Hopefully they'll know what decision they made. And I find it quite an interesting one, because, and it was something that Guy brought up when we were doing a podcast, and I mentioned the return of Ahsoka, and he said, oh no, because, and quite rightly so, that people haven't seen, or some people haven't seen the Clone Wars, and they haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, so to bring in Ahsoka would be like, who is this? There was a similar kind of situation there. So when you see it, you'll be like, oh, okay, that's what Alex was talking about. And a couple of people in the cinema said, oh, that's not right. That happened to that person. Because they didn't have that little bit of information in the middle. Of course, this Star Wars film did suffer from a few issues, as all Star Wars films do, as all films do. We had an appearance of a green testicle in a jar, singing. Not as bad as Return the Jedi, or that little singing segment. We also had a rather bizarre scene with the space pirates. It turns out that the leader of the space pirates is a young girl, and the way that everyone reacts to it is like, oh my gosh, we never expected it to be a young girl, even though the voice that was being projected out of the suit or the helmet was clearly not a raw human voice, it had clearly gone through kind of like almost like a Darth Vader voice box, and it was almost like a certain someone had got their hands on it again and had been like, oh, we must make men look sexist. They'd never assume that a strong pirate or merc or mercenary or whatever would be a woman, because, by God, how? But, I was just kind of sitting there like, okay, so? But, those are a few issues that I picked out. I personally think, and forgive me for not remembering the name of the actor, but the one who they got to play Han Solo, not as bad a choice as people were letting on. There are certain differences. It's very difficult to capture an actor's presence that they give off perfectly, especially if they're not the same age as the actor that's attempting to do it. So I have massive amounts of admiration, is that the right word, for anyone to take that kind of role on, and I think he did it rather well. I loved pretty much everything, and it's what I predicted. Again, I don't know if I did it on the podcast, but I predicted that these standalone films would be better than the core films, and once again it's living up to that prediction. So whether the next film, be it Kenobi or Lando, Kira, Han Solo Part 2, I think once again it's going to be better than this episode 9 that we're going to be getting. But my faith has now been very much so restored. Maybe not in the core films, but that there are storytellers out there who are able to tell a different but the same kind of story. And I think that's kind of what we were looking for, but not in like an episode 7 way. So yeah, really, really enjoyed. Definitely going to go back and see. There's some stuff I probably missed, some references perhaps. It's always good to rewatch, but I'll definitely recommend it as a watch. I need to go home and sleep and think about where this film lies in my lineup of films, because it's going to be up there. It may even be higher than Rogue One, but I think it may need a second viewing in order to have that for certain. One last thing I promised I would mention while my trousers fall down is was the ship that was revealed in Lego was an Imperial ship as opposed to the front of the Falcon. Yeah, I mean they just used it as a dropship for the heist. We had another robot death that was sad, not as sad as K2, but no, I loved the kind of like the way people treat robots, or droids, I guess. The issue that was brought up there, I thought that was quite interesting, and it threw in some comedic moments and then brought us back to the harsh reality of things, so I think that's important. And something I find bizarre though, and it's more of a personal issue I have, this was the first screening, so it's not like the people who have gone in, although someone did say this was perhaps their second viewing, it's not like these people have seen it before, but apparently just don't stick around to listen to the music. That's kind of like my thing, but apparently not. But anyway, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm sorry this podcast is probably a bit shorter than our usual ones, but may the force be with you, and we'll discuss this further in a later podcast.